So I interviewed Doug Emhoff this week in Wilmington, North Carolina. He's, of course, the spouse, the husband, the perfect wife guy of Kamala Harris, the vice president, and the Democratic nominee. And what was so interesting about the conversation is people think of him as this incredibly supportive spouse, which he definitely is. But he on his own, he gave up a very successful career as a lawyer in LA to support her and so that there were no conflicts of interest. He also is somebody who speaks so authentically about his faith. We talked a lot in this interview about the rise in anti-Semitism, how that's been impacting him personally, how he responds to all of these outrageous comments out there. Also, his role as kind of a feminist and somebody who talks about abortion rights. We also talked a little about football. It was a great interview, and I can't wait to share it.
So Doug Emhoff, the first gentleman, the husband of Kamala Harris, has been lifted up by the media and the feminists and all the people that love to bash masculinity and label it as toxic. Doug Emhoff has been lifted up as the poster child, as the model for the new age of masculinity. And the reason why he's being lifted up like that is because of how he sacrificed himself for his wife, how he has given up his position for his wife, how he is not the prototypical masculine man, strong man, but no, he's soft, he's gentle, he's sensitive. Now, is that reflective of biblical masculinity? Well, let's listen to Doug Emhoff's interview with Jen Psaki, and then we'll look at some things that have recently come out about old Dougie that may not give those feminists the same warm feelings as they had before.
Presidential campaign trail, but we have never really seen a political spouse quite like Doug Emhoff. In many ways, he's an unlikely force on the campaign trail. He left a massively successful career in entertainment law when he became second gentleman. And he did that to avoid any conflict of interest. How refreshing. He's a person deeply connected to his Jewish faith, and he has taken a front and center role in the fight against anti-Semitism. And at the end of the day, he is a proud wife guy. He doesn't shy away from talking about his wife, from defending her, and from advocating for many of the same issues that drive her, like abortion rights. We talked about those issues and much more when I caught up with him on the trail at a small business in Wilmington, North Carolina this week, where he was talking to voters about his wife's economic plans. I want to ask you about an economic issue that people always think of as an economic issue, and that's abortion rights. And your wife, Kamala Harris, the vice president, has been outspoken on this issue long before she was the nominee. She was traveling across the country talking about this issue. But you've also been front and center in talking about abortion rights, and you've also encouraged more men to be in the fight of talking about abortion rights, which is often thought of as a women's issue. Why do you think that's so important?
Well, look, after the Dobbs decision came down, she called me right away. She was actually on Air Force Two and said, Dougie, they actually did it. And we had the leaked opinion, we knew it was coming, but the fact that the Supreme Court would take away a fundamental right that had been on the books for 50 years, a right that my mom...
These people love to spin this lie as if, first of all, abortion was a right. It was not a right. It was a right to privacy that the Supreme Court ruled incorrectly that created Roe v. Wade. But they claim that people's rights are being taken away. No, it was removed at the federal level. People still have the ability to vote to decide at the state level. That is so deceptive, but so many people don't go below the surface. They just hear those talking points that people's rights are being taken away. I always say, what about the right of the unborn child? Does anyone ask that question? No one seems to care about the right of the unborn child to live. Where is that child's agency?
Also been an important part, or an interesting part of how people have talked about your role here is how your role has reshaped the perception of masculinity. And I'm not sure you planned on that, but you are an incredibly supportive spouse. Has that been an evolution for you? And do you think that's part of the role you might play as first gentleman?
It's funny, I've started to think a lot about this. I've always been like this. My dad was like this, and to me, it's the right thing to do. You know, support women. It's mutual. Like with Kamala and I, we support each other. We have each other's back. And I've said many times, when we lift up women, we support women, whether it's pay equity, childcare, family leave, and all these issues that, this post-Dobbs hellscape, women should not be less than. Women should not have less rights and be treated differently. That's not the American way. And it's also not like, if some woman succeeds, some dude out there is suffering, it's not a one-to-one relationship. When we lift up women, we lift up families, we lift up the economy. And when I was in the business world, it lifted up the organizations that I was in. It certainly lifted up the White House when you were there, with you there and Kamala as vice president. It was a great workplace there.
There's a pop culture phrase, wife guy, which you've kind of been known as. Are you familiar with this?
I've heard about it.
As called a wife guy, a proud wife guy? How do you feel about that?
Well, if I do something annoying to Kamala and she gets upset, I'll just show her that article.
Right.
And I'll say, I'm trying.
Or a t-shirt or a mug.
Yeah.
There are certainly people, you know who I'm going to ask you about, who are not as comfortable with fierce women, strong women, intelligent women. One of them is, of course, running against the vice president, Donald Trump. He seemed to be uncomfortable on the debate stage.
A wife guy? What is a wife guy? Is the man that has been castrated to where the woman wears the pants in the house? Is that a wife guy? That's not biblical masculinity, because in biblical masculinity, the man takes responsibility for his wife and his children. He does not dominate the wife. He's not domineering. He understands that in the eyes of God, he is responsible for his family. And so therefore, he takes on the role of leader, the role of headship in the home. In God's eyes, women and men have equal value, but we have different roles that we have to play. But in this modern age where they want to disrupt everything related to the patriarchy, having women in charge is what they want. And they like beta men like Doug here to play their role, to sit in the shadows, to not be leaders. Because to those women, that is a sign of subscribing to the patriarchy. So there you saw that puff piece of an interview that Jen Psaki had with Doug Emhoff. You have to know they work together in the Biden White House. So they are very chummy and familiar with each other. So of course she wasn't going to ask him any tough questions. But recently, the Daily Mail has uncovered some bad things about the perfect wife guy, Doug Emhoff. So it turns out that Doug Emhoff has been very violent in his past to women. That doesn't sound like a first gentleman to me. That definitely doesn't sound like biblical masculinity to me. Forcefully slapped ex-girlfriend for flirting with another man. He assaulted his ex-girlfriend. Struck the woman in the face so hard she spun around. So this is old Dougie with the woman that he hit. Now this falls on the heels, for those of you who don't know, Doug Emhoff has been married before. And he cheated on his first wife with the nanny. Got the nanny pregnant and then tried to pay the nanny hush money to keep quiet and then not to have the child. And she eventually had a miscarriage. So this is a guy that the media wants to portray as the epitome of the new age of masculinity. This is the guy that they want to have shown as masculine. This guy, Doug Emhoff. This is a guy that they want to display as his newfound way to be masculine. You have to understand what they're doing. They're doing this on purpose. They're doing this because they do not like what they're doing. They want to have these beta men. See, his act right here is a beta act. Betas do that. He wants to have, because he felt disrespected. So therefore he took it out on the woman. This is a beta action for sure. This is not biblical masculinity. This is the action of a man who is suppressing his emotions because he wants to lift up women. Being masculine, showing biblical masculinity is not a detriment to women. Real biblical masculinity uplifts women. Because as a biblically masculine man, you lay down your life for your family. You lay down your life for your wife. You sacrifice for your wife. You sacrifice for your family. You place their needs above yours. That's what true biblical masculinity looks like. You may be hurting, you may be in pain, but the needs of your wife comes before your needs. Because that's what Jesus did for us. He's the epitome of masculinity. And so therefore, we as biblical men follow his model. We follow him. That's what we do. He's our model for masculinity, not Doug Emhoff, not some beta man masking his true feelings because he wants a position of power. That's what these new age beta males do. These feminists, these male feminists, that's what they do. They mask their emotions. They suppress their emotions, and it usually comes out in a violent way. But biblical masculinity is what is needed in America. Real masculinity, the masculinity that uplifts women, that uplifts communities, that compels a man to come home to his family, that compels a man to sacrifice for his family, that compels a man to provide for his family. That is biblical masculinity, that compels a man to pray for his family. That's biblical masculinity, not this fake stuff that they're pushing all to come against toxic masculinity, please. And they will call biblical masculinity toxic because what they want to do, they want to reverse and dismantle the Western prescribed patriarchy. They want to dismantle it. But see, the patriarchy was established by God. You understand? The order was established by God. Man, woman, children, husband, wife, children. That was established by God, not by man. So when they say they want to dismantle it, they really want to dismantle God's biblical order. And all that does is make a community of victims. Well, we're not victims. We are empowered for greatness.